Every morning I wake up in a room that will never be mine. Four walls painted a faded greenish color that, according to Vanity, calms and helps older people feel connected to nature. I hate green. I always have. In 40 years, my Ethel never once suggested painting a single wall in our house green. She knew that for me, the color reminded me of the mold in the holding cells where I escorted lawbreakers in my prime. I am 74. I always wake up at 5:30, even though there is nowhere to get up to. It's a habit developed over years of service as a bailiff. In my former life, at this time I was already brewing strong black coffee, checking my service weapon, and reviewing my to-do list for the day. Now I lie there and count the cracks in the ceiling. There are 12 of them. For as long as I can remember being in this room, there have always been 12. Since I was brought here 3 years ago, I have dreamed so many times of waking up in my old house that I have lost count. Sometimes in my half-sleep, I feel like I'm still there, in the house that Ethel and I bought 45 years ago. A small but cozy house on a quiet street in Gainesville. The house where our children grew up. Or rather, our only child, our son Terrence. The house where every floorboard creaked with a familiar squeak, where the kitchen always smelled of fresh baking, and where my favorite leather sofa stood in the living room, worn shiny in the spot where I sat every evening after work. After Ethel died 10 years ago, the house became empty, but it still remained my refuge, until the day Terrence decided that I could no longer live alone. "Dad, you had a mini-stroke. You can't stay alone," he said at the time, sitting in the hospital room. "Vanity and I have thought about it and decided that it would be better for you to move in with us. We have a big house. There's plenty of room." I didn't want to. God knows I resisted as best I could. But after my right arm didn't work properly for 3 days and my speech became slurred, the arguments seemed unconvincing. And I agreed to sell the house full of memories and move in with my son and his wife, who always looked at me as if I had stained her favorite carpet. "We'll invest the money from the sale of the house in a reliable business," Terrence assured me. "I know of several promising projects. In a year or two, the amount will double, and you will be financially independent." I transferred all the money to his account, $200,000. My entire life, everything Ethel and I had saved, and the market value of our house. I trusted my only son. If I had been smarter, I would have limited myself to a check. But who expects a trick from their own flesh and blood? In Terrence and Vanity's house, the only room available for me was on the first floor, next to the pantry. It used to be a guest room that no one used. A room with green walls and a narrow window overlooking the blank fence of the neighboring property. It barely fit my bed, an old dresser, and an armchair. The rest of my belongings went to the attic or were temporarily stored with a friend of Terrence's, who, as I later learned, runs a consignment shop. I hear someone turning on the water upstairs. It's 6 in the morning. Vanity always gets up at this time to have time for her hour-long morning beauty routine before work. She owns a fashion boutique in the city center. It's a small business that barely survives, but it allows her to feel like a successful businesswoman. In her youth, she was a model. She worked in New York and even, according to her, in Milan. I haven't seen any photos, only heard endless stories about her career whenever guests come to visit. I slowly get out of bed, wincing from the pain in my joints. My arthritis gets worse every year, especially in wet weather. And in Gainesville, as luck would have it, it has been raining almost nonstop for the last few months. I get dressed slowly, trying to move quietly. If I run into Vanity in the kitchen, she'll inevitably grimace and say something like, "Hubert, you didn't wash your cup again yesterday." Or, "You could try not to shuffle so loudly. Some of us need to concentrate before an important day." And if Terrence is in the kitchen, he'll surely start asking about my plans, smiling cheerfully and falsely, as if he's really interested in my life. I wait until they both leave the house before leaving my room. I hear the front door slam, Terrence's car start up, an expensive sedan, bought, I suspect, with my money. Only when the sound of the engine fades into the distance do I go into the kitchen. The kitchen is the only place in the house where I feel more or less comfortable. It is large and bright, with a huge window overlooking the backyard. When no one is around, I can sit here for hours watching the birds fly to the feeder I installed last spring. Vanity was against it, afraid that the birds would dirty her perfect yard. But Terrence unexpectedly took my side. Perhaps it was one of the few moments when he remembered how we used to watch birds together in our garden when we were children. I make myself some instant coffee. Vanity forbade me from using their fancy coffee maker after I accidentally pressed the wrong button once and it hissed, spraying coffee all over the ceiling. I take yesterday's donut out of the fridge. Vanity and Terrence eat healthy food, oatmeal with berries, quinoa, spinach smoothies. I prefer normal food. After breakfast, I get myself ready and leave the house. I have the keys. Terrence didn't take them away from me, although I think Vanity insisted. What if he loses them and someone breaks into the house? I once heard her whisper loudly. Terrence replied something vague about me being his father after all, and that you can't lock an old man in the house. Every day, weather permitting, I go to the park. It's a small city park 15 minutes walk from Terrence's house. There are benches by the pond where old people like me gather. We feed the ducks, discuss politics, and complain about our health. Today I see Willis on our usual bench. We met when I was just starting out as a bailiff. Willis was then an assistant district attorney, a tall, fit man with a sharp gaze and an impeccable reputation. Now he was stooped and gray, but his eyes were still as lively and attentive as ever. "Hubie, you old rascal," he greets me, patting the bench next to him. "I thought you weren't coming today." I sit down next to him, stretching my legs with relief. Lately, my knees have been hurting more and more. "I had to wait until the royal couple left the palace," I reply, and Willis grunts understandingly. "Still as bad?" "Worse," I say, taking a bag of breadcrumbs for the ducks out of my pocket. "Yesterday, Vanity suggested renovating my room. You know what that means? She wants to turn it into a multifunctional space. I think she just wants to move me to the attic or the basement." "What does Terrence say?" "What does Terrence—" I sigh, throwing the crumbs into the water. The ducks immediately swim closer. "He always agrees with her. Vanity knows better, Dad. Vanity has excellent taste, Dad." Sometimes I think he doesn't have an opinion of his own. Willis shakes his head. He's known Terrence since childhood, watched him grow up. Maybe he understands better than I do what went wrong. "You know, Hubie," he says after a pause, "I keep thinking about that money you transferred to Terrence after you sold the house. It's been 3 years now. Have you ever seen any reports on the income from those investments?" This question has been bothering me for a long time, but I was afraid to even ask myself. Admitting that your own son might have deceived you is too bitter a pill for an old man to swallow. "No," I reply quietly. When I ask, he always says that the market is unstable, that we need to wait, or that he has reinvested everything in a new project with a higher return. "And you believe him?" I remain silent, watching the ducks greedily gobbling up the bread. Ducks don't deceive each other. Everything is simple with them. "I want to believe," I finally say. "He's my son, Willis, my only child." How can I suspect him of something like that? "Because you're not blind," Willis puts his hand on my shoulder. "A new car, expensive watches, constant dinners at restaurants, even though his business, as far as I know, isn't thriving. Where did the money come from, Hubie?" I feel a wave of anger and resentment rising inside me. Anger at Terrence for his betrayal. Resentment at myself for my blindness and naivety. "Do you have proof of the transfer?" Willis asks, and I sense the professional interest of a prosecutor in his voice. "Of course. I transferred the money from my account to his. I have a bank statement. Keep it. It might come in handy." Willis looks at me seriously. "If you ever decide, well, seek justice." I nod silently. The idea of suing my own son seems wild, impossible. And yet, "How's your granddaughter?" Willis asks, changing the subject. "Do you see her?" "Audra?" I smile bitterly. Terrence did everything he could to make her disappear from his life after his divorce from Paige. And that means from mine, too. I don't even know where she lives now. The last I heard, she graduated from law school and is working somewhere on the East Coast. "As a prosecutor," Willis nods, "in Boston. I've been following her career. She's a talented girl, just like her grandfather." I look at him in surprise. "You know where she is?" "Of course. We're lawyers, Hubie. We always know where to find each other." He smiles. "She asked about you a couple of months ago. She called me when she found out I was still living in Gainesville." "And what did you tell her?" The truth that you're living with Terrence and his new wife, that you sold the house, that I see you in the park almost every day, and you're still the same stubborn old man you always were. I laugh sincerely for the first time in a long time. The thought that Audra remembers me, asks about me, warms my heart. We used to be close. I took her fishing, taught her how to hammer nails, told her about my work. She always said she wanted to be like me, to uphold law and justice. Apparently, she succeeded. She would have liked to contact you directly, but she didn't know how Terrence would react, Willis continues. You know what a scandal it was when he and Paige divorced. I know. Terrence left his first wife and 5-year-old daughter for Vanity, who was 15 years younger than him, and seemed to him to be his ticket to a better life. He didn't pay alimony, hid from the bailiffs, how ironic considering my profession, and avoided any responsibility. I was ashamed of him then, and I'm ashamed now. Give me her number, I ask. I want to talk to my granddaughter. Willis hesitates. Are you sure this is a good idea? If Terrence finds out, I'm 74, damn it! I bang my cane on the ground. What will he do? Disinherit me? I laugh bitterly. I have nothing left, Willis. He's already taken everything. But he won't take away my right to talk to my own granddaughter. Willis looks at me for a long time, then nods and takes out his phone. I'll text you her number. But be careful, Hubie. You still live in his house. His wife's house, to be precise, I correct him, and I feel it all too well every single day. We sit in the park for a while longer, talking about old times, former colleagues, politics, but my thoughts are far away. I think about the $200,000 that I will most likely never see. About Terrence, who so easily betrayed his father. About Vanity, who sees me as an annoying obstacle to their perfect life. And about Audrey, who remembers her grandfather somewhere far away. When I return home, the house is quiet. Terrence is still at work, and Vanity is probably at her boutique. I go to my room, sit in my chair, and look out the window at the gray fence. Everything is as usual, but something has changed. Something inside me. For the first time in a long time, I feel a spark ignite inside me. A spark of anger that slowly turns into determination. For too long, I have been an obedient old man, unwilling to cause trouble. Maybe it's time to remember what it's like to fight for justice. The rain has been pounding on the windows for the 3rd day in a row. The October rains in Gainesville were always prolonged, as if the sky had decided to cry itself out before the cold weather set in. The dampness seeped into my bones, making my arthritis ache more than usual. On days like this, I rarely went to the park. Willis also preferred to stay home. We called each other, discussed the news, complained about the weather, but postponed our meetings until the clouds cleared. Out of idleness, I wandered around the house when no one was there, studying the photographs on the walls. I wasn't in any of them. Terrence and Vanity on the beach, Terrence and Vanity in the mountains, Terrence and Vanity at some charity event, the perfect couple with perfect smiles. Sometimes I thought they had retouched these photos on purpose to look happier than they really were. That evening, when my world was turned upside down again, the rain intensified to a storm warning. Terrence came home earlier than usual. I heard the front door slam and his voice in the hallway. He usually went straight upstairs to change and get ready for dinner. But this time, he stopped at the door to the living room. I was sitting in my room reading a worn detective novel that I already knew by heart. The thin walls of the old house carried sound well, especially when music was playing in the living room. There was no music today, but the voices were clear. Therese, honey, finally. I was starting to worry. Vanity's voice was sweeter than sugar. She only spoke like that when she wanted something. The traffic was terrible because of the rain. I barely made it. Terrence sounded tired. It's been a hellish week. Stone is breathing down my neck again about those reports. Forget about work. I have an idea that will definitely cheer you up. I could almost see Vanity cupping his face with her manicured fingers. Let's have a party on Saturday, I tensed involuntarily. Their parties usually meant a night locked in a room with the TV on low volume so as not to disturb the guests. A party? Terrence didn't sound too enthusiastic. I don't know, Van. Work is crazy right now. I'm afraid they might. That's exactly why we need a party, Vanity interrupted him. You'll be able to impress the right people. I've already made a guest list. The Stones will definitely be there. He won't be able to fire you if you're drinking martinis together in our living room. I heard Terrence sigh heavily. From the sound of his footsteps, I could tell he had sat down in the chair, the one he had bought for an exorbitant amount of money for special occasions. You're probably right, he finally said, but there's one problem. Your father. Vanity didn't need clarification. I've already thought about that. We can send him to that new retirement home for the night. They have a one-day program. To a retirement home? He won't agree to that. Then we'll think of something else. Maybe ask our neighbor Martha to look after him? Or just lock him in his room with dinner and the TV? I don't care, to be honest. The main thing is that the old geezer doesn't bother the guests. Did you see how he spilled wine on the tablecloth last time? It was my grandmother's tablecloth. I felt my cheeks burning with humiliation. Old geezer? That's what she called me behind my back. But why was I surprised? She barely deigned to call me Hubert, pronouncing it as if she had a lemon in her mouth. Don't talk like that, Van. Terrence's voice sounded unconvincing, without any real protest. A formal objection, nothing more. He's still my father. A father who's become a burden, Vanity cut in. Listen, dear, I understand your feelings. I really do. But we can't keep him here forever. Have you seen the bills for his medication? And the doctors? It's only going to get worse with each passing month. I closed the book, forgetting to mark the page. Everything inside me tightened. They were talking about me as if I no longer existed. I know. Terrence lowered his voice, but I could still hear every word. I've already looked into nursing homes. There's a good one in Oklahoma, a state-run facility. His health insurance should cover most of the costs. Oklahoma? Vanity laughed. God, Therese, that's the middle of nowhere. I was thinking of something more respectable. After all, your father had savings, which aren't in the best shape right now, Terrence said, his voice tense. The investments didn't pay off. The market's unstable, you know that. I barely managed to stifle a bitter laugh. Investments. He couldn't find any other words for outright theft. What? Vanity raised her voice. You said your father's money was generating income. We were counting on it to pay for the roof repairs. And a new car. I know, baby, I know. Terrence rustled with something, apparently pouring himself a drink. The creak of the bar door, the clink of glass. But there was a setback. The company I invested in went bankrupt. Nothing I can do about it. So what now? Vanity was clearly boiling over. Are we stuck with your father and no way to pay for a decent nursing home? Oklahoma will do, Terrence repeated stubbornly. Listen, Van, I'm having problems at work right now. Stone is hinting at layoffs. If I lose my job, we'll have to tighten our belts. All this talk about a new car will have to be put on hold. There was a heavy pause. I imagined Vanity crossing her arms over her chest, pursing her lips, an expression I had seen dozens of times when she didn't get what she wanted. All right, she finally said with feigned calm. Let's get through this party first. It's really important, Terrence. We'll invite everyone who's important in your company. And Melanie Pierce, her husband owns that consulting firm, remember? Just in case it doesn't work out with Stone. Okay, Terrence conceded. We'll have the party. But what about Dad? I already said, we'll lock him in his room. Or the storage room, I don't care, Vanity said again in that honeyed voice. Just imagine, no gray hairs in the appetizers, no spilled drinks, no old people talking about illnesses that will scare away all the guests. Just a perfect evening. He could hear Terrence hesitating. Even now, even after everything, something human in him resisted the idea of locking up his own father like an animal. I'll talk to him, he finally decided. I'll explain the situation. Maybe he'll agree to spend the evening in his room. Of course, dear, Vanity purred with poorly concealed sarcasm. Whatever you say. I heard them move into the kitchen, their voices muffled. I no longer needed to eavesdrop. I already knew everything I needed to know. My hands trembled as I dialed Willis's number. Not from fear, but from rage. Pure, unadulterated rage, the kind I hadn't felt in years. I was angry not only at them, but at myself, for letting myself be cornered, for trusting my son so blindly, for losing control of my own life. Willis Cromwell here, his voice sounded formal, like it did in the old days in the courtroom. It's me. My voice was hoarse. I cleared my throat. We need to talk. Urgently. Hubie, what's wrong? Willis instantly picked up on the tension in my voice. They want to lock me up, I said quietly, afraid they might hear me from the kitchen. They're having a party on Saturday, and they're going to lock me in a room or a storage closet so I don't get in the way. What the hell? Willis exclaimed. They can't do that. It's illegal. They can, I said with a bitter smile. It's their house. I'm just a guest here. And that's not all. They talked about sending me to a nursing home in Oklahoma, a state-run one. Terrence said my money was gone. Supposedly the company he invested in went bankrupt. On the other end of the line, Willis swore like he hadn't sworn since we served together. Bastard, he finally said. I'm sorry, Hubie, but your son is a bastard. He just took your money. $200,000. And now he wants to get rid of you in a cheap nursing home. I know, I replied quietly. I think I always knew. I just didn't want to admit it. Willis sighed deeply, and I imagined him rubbing his nose, a gesture that always meant he was thinking hard. Get out of there, Hubie, he finally said. Pack your things and come to my place. I have plenty of room. Where would I go, Willis? I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. I'm an old man with arthritis and high blood pressure. No money, no home. You have me, Willis said firmly, and we'll take him to court. We'll make him give you your money back. You have proof of the transfer, remember? I do. I remembered the bank statement I kept in a box of documents under my bed. But court takes a long time, and it's expensive. I'll take your case myself for free, Willis said, his voice steely. It's a matter of principle, Hubie. I won't let your son rob you and throw you out on the street. I felt a lump in my throat. Willis had always been a good friend, a true friend, the kind you don't often meet in life. Thank you, Willis, I struggled to find the words. But I can't just leave like that. I need to think and prepare. What is there to think about? They plan to lock you up like a dog, Willis almost shouted. Quiet, please. I instinctively glanced at the door, even though I knew Terrence and Vanity were still in the kitchen. I'm not going to sit idly by, but I need a plan, and there's something else I want to discuss with you. I'm listening. Willis calmed down a little. You said you're in touch with Audra. I lowered my voice to a whisper. My granddaughter needs to know what's going on, what her father is doing to me, and what he did with my money. There was a pause on the line. You want to involve Audra? Willis finally asked. She's a prosecutor, Hubie, not a family therapist. She's my granddaughter, I said firmly, and she deserves to know what kind of person her father has become. Besides, she hasn't seen him in how long? 25 years? Maybe it's time for a family reunion. Willis grunted, and I could almost see his crooked smile. You're up to something, old fox. What is it? Their party, I began slowly, formulating a plan that was just beginning to take shape in my mind. They want to impress important people, Terrence's business partners, show them what a perfect life they have, what a perfect family. Without an old father spoiling the picture, Willis finished for me. Exactly, I nodded to myself. What if something else spoils the picture? Or someone? Audra, Willis was beginning to understand my plan. What if my granddaughter suddenly shows up at this party? I almost smiled as I imagined the scene. Terrence's adult daughter from his first marriage, whose existence his current wife may not even suspect. A prosecutor with an impeccable reputation, unlike her father. What if she tells all these important business partners how her father abandoned her and her mother? And how he treats his own father? Willis whistled. Hubie, you think like a real strategist. It will be impressive. They want to lock me in a storage room. I felt a wave of anger rising inside me again. Humiliate me in my own home. Well, let them find out what it's like to be humiliated. But how will you contact Audra? And how will you convince her to come? Willis asked the right questions. First, I need the number you promised me. I tried to keep my voice calm and reasonable. As for convincing her, I think she'll be interested to know what her father is doing and how he disposed of the money from the sale of my house. Audra is very principled, Willis said thoughtfully. She takes after you, but she may refuse to get involved in family squabbles. Then I'll persuade her, I said firmly. She's my granddaughter. I have the right to ask her for help. Willis sighed, but it was no longer a sigh of doubt, but rather a sigh of acceptance. All right, Hubie, I'll text you her number, and I'm willing to help arrange this visit. But you need to be careful. If Terrence suspects anything, he may take action. What kind of action? I smiled bitterly. Lock me in the storage room ahead of time? He might try to take your phone away, Willis remarked judiciously, or send you somewhere for the weekend. Be prepared for anything. I will, I promised. And Willis, thank you for everything. Don't thank me until we get your money back, his voice was firm, and until we teach your son a lesson. Keep me posted after you talk to Audra. We said goodbye, and I sat on the bed, staring at the phone in my hands. Soon a message came from Willis with Audra's number and a short note. She knows you'll call. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I had an important conversation ahead of me, a conversation with my granddaughter, whom I hadn't seen in almost 25 years. Would I be able to convince her to help me? Would she want to get involved in this unpleasant situation? But before I had a chance to dial the number, my bedroom door swung open without a knock. Terrence was standing in the doorway. His tie was loosened, and he was holding a glass of whiskey. Father, he began with that false cheerfulness I hated so much. We need to talk. I hid the phone under my pillow and prepared for a conversation that I already knew would revolve around the upcoming party and my absence from it. But a plan was already forming in my head, a plan that would change everything. Saturday began with the sound of a vacuum cleaner outside my door. Vanity was doing a deep clean before the party, giving orders to the maid she hired for Cash, who usually came once every 2 weeks. Today, poor Esperanza was forced to clean the house until it sparkled, while Vanity herself rushed around the rooms with the crazy look of a sergeant, checking every corner. I didn't leave my room until 11. After talking to Terrence a few days ago, we reached a shaky agreement. I promised not to show myself to the guests, and he promised not to lock me in my room. I was sure he would break his promise, just as he had broken all the others. That was part of the plan. During those few days, I called Audra twice. The first conversation was awkward. Too many years and too many hurts separated us. But her voice, so similar to her mother Paige's, awakened a tenderness in me that I thought was long dead. Grandpa? She asked when I finally gathered my courage and dialed her number. It felt strange to hear that word addressed to me. Grandpa. Terrence never allowed her to call me that in front of him when she was a child. Audra, I felt my voice tremble. It's been so long since I've heard your voice. 25 years. Her tone was reserved but not cold. I was 5 when my father took us from your house for the last time. I remember you gave me a chocolate bar as a goodbye gift. You said we'd see each other soon. But we didn't. I swallowed the bitter lump in my throat. Your father? He decided otherwise. I know. Her voice softened slightly. Mom told me when I was older, how Dad forbade you to see me, how he left us for another woman, how he didn't pay child support. I'm so sorry, was all I could say. You have nothing to apologize for, Grandpa. Her voice sounded determined. Willis said you had problems, that my father had done something wrong again. I told her everything, about selling the house, about the money that had disappeared into thin air, about how I was being kept in this house as an unwelcome guest, and about the upcoming party, where they planned to lock me away like an inconvenient truth that needed to be hidden. When I finished, Audra was silent for a long time. I was starting to worry that the connection had been lost when she finally spoke. I'm coming, she said firmly. I'll fly to Gainesville on Saturday, and I want Willis to take me to that party. Are you sure? I hadn't expected such quick resolve. Your father? My father must answer for his actions. She cut me off with the directness that Willis would say she had inherited from me. And I want to help you get your money back. Legally, Grandpa, what he did could be classified as fraud. I felt a wave of warmth wash over me. My granddaughter had grown into a strong woman, a woman ready to fight for justice. Our second conversation was more businesslike. We discussed the details of the plan. Willis was supposed to meet her at the airport and bring her to the party about an hour after it started, when the guests would be relaxed and talkative. By that time, according to our calculations, Terrence would have locked me up somewhere, and I would be able to activate the plan by calling Willis. And then Saturday came, the day of the party. I felt strangely calm despite the nervous tension in the house. When I finally left the room, Vanity gave me a disapproving look. Finally decided to get up? She folded her arms across her chest. Did Terrence talk to you? About tonight? He did, I nodded, heading for the coffee maker. Today I decided to break the rules and use their expensive car. After all, what could they do? Kick me out? That was part of my plan. And you remember what we agreed on? Vanity watched my every move with undisguised irritation. Of course, I said calmly, taking a sip of coffee. I'll stay in my room, I won't go out to the guests, and I won't make any noise. It's like house arrest. Vanity pursed her lips. Don't be so dramatic, Hubert. It's just for one evening. We ordered you pizza, it will be delivered by 6, and Terrence installed a new TV with cable channels in your room. How generous, I couldn't help being sarcastic. This is an important evening for us, Vanity ignored my tone. Terrence's career depends on it. I'm just asking you to be understanding. Understanding, I nodded, thinking about how understanding this woman had been when she took my things for storage, which then mysteriously disappeared. Or when she turned off my TV for a week because I accidentally turned it up too loud when she had a migraine. The day dragged on slowly. Vanity bustled about with preparations, and I wandered around the house trying not to catch her eye. Terrence arrived at 4 o'clock, earlier than usual. He looked tense but tried to hide it with a forced smile. Dad? He nodded at me as he walked into the living room with bags from the deli. How are you? Fine, I replied with an equally fake smile. I'm looking forward to an evening alone in front of the TV. Terrence put the bags on the table and looked at me with unexpected seriousness. Listen, I know this is awkward, but you could show a little understanding. Things are difficult at work right now. This party could change everything. Understanding? I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, which I had been holding back for months. How were you being understanding when you took my money and my things? When you promised to invest the money from the sale of my house and then spent it on your toys? Terrence paled noticeably. Don't start, Dad. Not today, his voice hardened. I already explained. The investments didn't pay off. That's business. It happens. Business? I laughed bitterly. Call a spade, son. You stole from your father, the man who raised you, who taught you everything you know. And now you're holding me captive in this house and want to lock me in a room so I don't ruin your precious party. Terrence glanced quickly toward the kitchen, where Vanity was arranging appetizers on plates. Quiet, he hissed. Let's discuss this later, okay? When the party's over, we'll sit down and talk properly. About everything. About money. About your future. About a nursing home. A nursing home? I said it loud enough for Vanity to hear. So that's it. You've already decided everything. When are you planning to turn me in? Next week? Or will you wait until Christmas so you don't spoil the holiday mood? Dad, please. Terrence clenched his fist but remained outwardly calm. Let's not make a scene. Not today. When, Terrence? When will we have a real conversation? I could feel my voice trembling. When will you admit that you stole my money? That you abandoned me to my fate? That you abandoned your daughter 25 years ago just as easily as you are now planning to get rid of me? At the mention of Audra, Terrence's face changed. It had always been a sore subject, a daughter whose existence he preferred to forget. Don't you dare, he hissed, taking a step toward me. Don't you dare talk about her. You don't know anything. I know you're a terrible father, I insisted, and a terrible son. Your mother would turn in her grave if she knew what you did to me, what you plan to do. Terrence's face contorted with rage. He grabbed my shoulder. Hard, painfully hard. Enough, he growled. One more word and I swear you'll regret it. Terrence. Vanity's voice from the kitchen made him flinch. What's going on? He instantly let go of me and forced a smile. Nothing, dear. Just a little misunderstanding with my father. Misunderstanding? I smirked. Is that what stealing and neglecting your parents is called now? Vanity entered the living room, drying her hands with a towel. Her gaze darted between me and Terrence. What's going on? What is he talking about? Nothing, Terrence replied quickly. My father is just upset about the party. I explained to him that it's important to us. And the nursing home, I added, looking directly at Vanity, in Oklahoma, where you plan to send me. Vanity froze, her eyes narrowing. You told him? She asked Terrence with undisguised irritation. No, but he must have been eavesdropping. Terrence shot me an angry look. Dad, we're not sending you anywhere. We're thinking of your best interests, of professional care that we can't provide. My best interests, I laughed. Then give me back my $200,000. I'll decide for myself what's best for me. Vanity paled and turned to Terence. Does he know about the money? Her voice sounded frightened. Of course I know, I replied instead of Terence. I may be old, but I'm not out of my mind. Did you think I wouldn't notice you buying new cars, expensive watches, renovating your house, all with the money from the sale of my house? The money Terence promised to invest? Listen, Hubert, Vanity tried to pull herself together. It's all very complicated. Investments don't always bring a return. Sometimes they fail. That's business. I wonder what the tax authorities will say, I said thoughtfully, or the police, about how my son embezzled my money under the pretext of investing. I have proof of the transfer, you know, and there are no investment documents. A heavy silence hung in the living room. Terence and Vanity exchanged frightened glances. Are you threatening us? Terence finally asked, his voice trembling. No, I shook my head. Just reminding you of the facts. Facts that could come out if you decide to get rid of me against my will. Vanity grabbed Terence's arm and pulled him aside. They began whispering, glancing tensely at me. I pretended not to hear, although I could make out fragments of their conversation. He wouldn't dare. Scandal. Your career. The guest will be here in 2 hours. Finally, Terence turned to me, his face stony. All right, Father. What do you want? I want my money back, I said firmly. All 200,000. And I want to be treated with respect while I live in this house. The money Luraria's invested, Terence said uncertainly. I can't just give it back. It will take time. How much time? A month, maybe 2, he was clearly stalling. And until then? I crossed my arms over my chest. Until then, we'll all live as one big happy family. Vanity interjected with a fake smile. But today, Hubert, today you really should spend the evening in your room. For Terence's sake. For his career. I looked at both of them. These people who thought they could manipulate me, lie to me, use me. And I decided to play along with them. Just a little longer. Okay, I nodded. But I want a written promise that you'll return the money. And I want you to stop planning to send me to a nursing home. Of course, Father, Terence exhaled with relief. We'll discuss everything after the party. Now why don't you go to your room? We need to finish the preparations. I nodded silently and headed for my room, feeling their eyes on my back. They thought they had won, that they had appeased a foolish old man with empty promises. They didn't know that the plan was already in motion and that their little perfect world would soon collapse. I spent the rest of the day in my room, getting ready. I made sure my phone was fully charged. I checked that the bank statement proving the transfer of money to Terence was safely hidden under the lining of my jacket. And I waited. At 7 in the evening, the first guests began to arrive. I heard the doorbell ring. Greetings, the clinking of glasses. Music, laughter, conversation. All of it reached my room despite the closed door. Around 8 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I knew it was Terence. It was time for the next act of our little drama. Father? He opened the door slightly. May I come in? I sat in my chair, pretending to read a book. In fact, I had been rereading the same page for half an hour, too excited to concentrate. Come in, I said without looking up from my book. Terence entered and closed the door behind him. He was wearing his best suit, his hair neatly combed, and he smelled of expensive cologne. Everything okay? He asked with feigned concern. Did they bring you pizza? Yes, thank you. I nodded at the untouched box on the table. I had no appetite. Listen, Dad. Terence sat down on the edge of my bed. About our conversation, I understand. I really do. And I'll pay you back, I promise. I just need time. Of course, I finally looked up at him. I understand. Terence didn't seem to expect such compliance. He narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Really? You're not angry? No, I shook my head. You're my son. I want to believe you. The relief on his face was almost comical. Did he really think it was that simple? That I would forget the betrayal, the lies, the neglect? Thanks, Dad, he stood up. I'll go see the guests then. Are you sure you'll be okay here? Absolutely, I smiled. Go on, enjoy yourself. Don't worry about me. Terrence nodded and was already turning toward the door when I added, "By the way, son, I left my blood pressure pills in the bathroom upstairs. Could you bring them to me? I'm afraid I won't be able to sleep without them." It was a lie, the pills were in my pocket, but I needed to get him out of the room. "Sure," Terrence nodded. "I'll be right back." As soon as he left, I quickly got up, grabbed my phone, and headed for the door. The plan was simple. I was going to accidentally run into the guests, cause some awkwardness, maybe even a small scandal. Nothing serious, just enough to make Terrence panic and do what I expected. Lock me up somewhere. I went out into the hallway and headed for the living room, where voices and music were coming from. There were a lot of guests, at least 20 people, all in expensive suits and dresses, with glasses in their hands. Vanity was standing in the center of a group of women, saying something with animated gestures. I took a few steps into the living room, and the conversations began to subside. People turned around, looking at me with curiosity. An elderly man in an old sweater and trousers, clearly out of place in this elegant setting. Vanity was the first to notice me. Her face froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening in horror. "Hubert," she squeezed out, "what are you doing here?" I decided to say hello to the guests. I smiled innocently. After all, I live in this house too. At that moment, Terrence appeared from the hallway. Seeing me among the guests, he turned pale. "Father!" He almost ran across the room. "What are you doing? You promised." "I just wanted to be polite," I shrugged. "To meet your friends. It's not every day we have such important guests." I saw panic spread across Terrence's face. He grabbed my elbow, not roughly but insistently, and pulled me toward the hallway. "Excuse me," he said to the guests. "My father isn't feeling very well. I'm going to take him to his room." "I feel fine," I objected, raising my voice. "And I'd like to tell your guests how you disposed of the money from the sale of my house. The $200,000 you promised to invest, but instead..." Terrence squeezed my elbow so hard it hurt and practically dragged me out of the living room, away from the surprised looks of the guests. In the hallway, he hissed, "What are you doing? You promised. And you promised to give me my money back," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "But we both know your promises are worthless, don't we, son?" His face was contorted with rage. He looked around as if searching for a way out, and his gaze fell on the storage room door. "You asked for it," he growled, opening the door and pushing me inside. "A deadbeat like you won't get in the way of our fun." The door slammed shut, and I heard the lock click. Terrence had locked me in the storage room, a dark, cramped space filled with boxes, canned goods, and household chemicals. The only source of light was a thin strip under the door. I smiled in the darkness. Everything was going according to plan. I took my phone out of my pocket, the screen lit up the small space, and dialed Willis's number. "Hubie?" My friend's voice sounded tense. "Everything going according to plan?" "Perfectly," I whispered, although it wasn't necessary. The music and voices from the living room easily drowned out my words. "He locked me in the storage room just as we expected." "What a bastard," Willis cursed. "We're on our way. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Audra's with me." "How is she?" I couldn't contain my excitement at the thought of meeting my granddaughter after so many years. "She's determined," Willis replied, "and very angry at her father. Are you sure you want to go through with this? You can still back out." "No," I said firmly. "It's time Terrence learned that his actions have consequences." We agreed that Willis would call me just before arriving, and I turned off my phone to save battery. The storage room was stuffy and smelled of household chemicals, but I didn't pay any attention to that. I leaned against the wall and listened to the sounds of the party. Soon the voices and music grew louder. The party was in full swing. I could hear Vanity's laughter, loud and slightly exaggerated. Terrence was saying something. I could hear his voice, but I couldn't make out the words. Then someone turned up the music, and the conversations were drowned out by the rhythmic sounds. Time dragged on slowly. I tried to get comfortable among the boxes and cans, but there wasn't much room. My knees ached from the awkward position, and my back was stiff. But I waited patiently, knowing that everything would change soon. Finally, my phone vibrated. A message from Willis. "We're at the entrance. We'll be there in 5 minutes." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my wildly beating heart. In 5 minutes, my granddaughter would walk into this house. In 5 minutes, my son would face the consequences of his actions. The minutes dragged on like hours. I listened to the sounds of the party, waiting for the doorbell that would change everything. And then, finally, through the music and conversation, I heard it, the distinct sound of the doorbell. The music stopped. Someone, Terrence or Vanity, I assumed, went to answer the door. I heard muffled voices and then, "Terrence Daly?" It was Audra's voice, firm and confident. "Hello, Dad. Long time no see." The house fell completely silent. I could picture the scene. The guests frozen with their glasses in their hands, Vanity looking confusedly from Terrence to the unfamiliar woman, and Terrence himself frozen in shock at the sight of his daughter, whom he hadn't seen in a quarter of a century. "Audra!" Terrence's voice sounded as if he had seen a ghost. "What are you? How did you—" "Your father called me," Audra replied. "My grandfather, the one you locked in the storage room like a useless thing." There was another silence, followed by surprised exclamations from the guests. I pressed my ear against the storage room door, trying not to miss a word of what was happening in the living room. Through the thin barrier, I could hear the excited voices of the guests, among which Audra's clear, confident voice stood out. My granddaughter, whom I hadn't seen in 25 years. "Who is this woman?" I recognized Vanity's high-pitched, slightly hysterical voice. "Terrence, what's going on?" Instead of my husband's answer, I heard another familiar voice, Willis. "And you must be Terrence's second wife," he said with a hint of irony in his voice. "Allow me to introduce myself. Willis Cromwell, former district attorney, friend of Hubert Daly, whom your husband locked in the storage room." "What nonsense!" Vanity exclaimed indignantly. "Terrence, tell them they're wrong." Terrence's silence spoke louder than any words. I could almost see his pale face, his confused gaze, his frantic attempts to think of a way out of the situation. "Where is he?" Audra's voice grew harsher. "Where is my grandfather?" "Please." Terrence's voice sounded tense, falsely conciliatory. "Let's not make a scene. We have guests. We can discuss this later in private." "Guests?" Audra's voice was bitter. "Oh, I was just about to talk to your guests, to tell them something interesting about the host of the evening." There was some nervous laughter and shuffling of feet. The guests were clearly uncomfortable, but no one was in a hurry to leave. It's not every day you get to see a spectacle like this. "Is Hubert here?" Willis asked insistently. "Answer me, Terrence, or would you prefer us to call the police?" There was a tense pause, then a heavy sigh. "In the storage room in the hallway," Terrence finally admitted. "You locked your own father in the storage room?" One of the guests' voices sounded openly indignant. I heard footsteps approaching, then the sound of a key turning in the lock. The storage room door swung open, and the bright light from the hallway momentarily blinded me. Willis stood in the doorway, and behind him I saw a woman who made my heart skip a beat. Audra, my little Audra, now a grown woman. Tall, slender, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and the same piercing blue eyes her mother had. She was wearing a business suit, dark blue, austere but elegant. "Grandpa," she whispered, her formal tone replaced by something soft, almost childlike. "Audra." I couldn't keep the tremor out of my voice. Willis helped me out of the storage room, supporting me by the elbow. Years in a cramped room and 2 hours in an even cramped storage room had made my joints inflexible. I struggled to straighten up, wincing in pain. Audra rushed to me, hugging me with the sincerity that only children and very honest adults possess. I hugged her back, feeling tears well up in my eyes. 25 years, a quarter of a century apart from my only granddaughter. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, stepping back and looking intently at my face. "Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine," I assured her, even though my back and knees ached from the uncomfortable position in the storage room. "Now that you're here, I'm perfectly fine." We slowly made our way to the living room, where Terrence, Vanity, and about 20 of their guests waited in tense silence. At the sight of us, the conversations finally died down. All eyes were fixed on our strange procession. An elderly man in rumpled clothes, supported by a former prosecutor and an elegant young woman. "Father," Terrence began, stepping forward with a fake smile, "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. I didn't mean to." "Misunderstanding?" Audra interrupted him. "You locked a 74-year-old man in a storage room, and you call that a misunderstanding?" Terrence shifted his confused gaze from me to his daughter, as if he couldn't believe this was really happening. "Audra," He tried to compose himself. You've changed a lot. I wouldn't have recognized you if... Don't bother, Audra cut him off coldly. 25 years without a single phone call, letter or birthday card, and now you want to pretend we're a family? She turned to the assembled guests. Allow me to introduce myself. Audra Daly, Senior Assistant District Attorney for Boston, and the daughter of Terrence Daly, who abandoned her at the age of 5 for a younger woman. Vanity's face contorted with shock and rage. Terrence, she gasped. You have a daughter? Had, Audra corrected her with an icy smile. Legally, yes. Biologically, absolutely. But it's hard to call him a father when he never came to a school play, never sent money for college, and never even asked if I was alive. The room became so quiet that you could hear the old clock ticking on the mantelpiece. The guests exchanged glances, some looking openly shocked, others embarrassed, as if they had accidentally stumbled upon someone else's family drama. I think everyone should leave, Terrence finally said, addressing the guests. Unfortunately, we have family circumstances. Oh no, Audra stepped forward. Let your guests stay. I'm sure they'll be interested to learn more about their host. For example, how he treats his own father. Audra, Terrence said warningly, you don't understand the situation? I understand the situation perfectly well, she snapped. My grandfather sold his house at your insistence. He transferred $200,000 to you for investments, and you embezzled that money, and now you're planning to dump him in a cheap nursing home in Oklahoma. Did I miss anything? Terrence's face flushed red. That's not true. The investments didn't pay off. The market is unstable. Investments? Audra laughed bitterly. What investments, Father? Show me the documents, the receipt, anything that proves you really invested grandfather's money and didn't spend it on your whims. One of the guests, a tall man in an expensive suit, stepped forward. Terrence, what's going on? What $200,000 are we talking about? Is that the money you invested in our joint project 3 years ago? Willis whistled softly. Now that's interesting, he turned to the man. Allow me to introduce myself. Willis Cromwell, former district attorney. And you, if I'm not mistaken? Bradford Stone. The man extended his hand for a handshake. Owner of Stone Investments. Terrence has been working for me for 5 years. And he told you that the $200,000 he invested in your project was his father's money? Willis clarified. Stone frowned. No, he said it was his personal savings. Savings from years of work. Oda took a folder out of her purse and pulled out several sheets of paper. Here's a bank statement. She handed the document to Stone. $200,000 transferred from Hubert Daly's account to Terrence Daly's account 3 years ago. And here's a letter from Terrence. She took out another sheet, where he promises to invest the money and return it with interest. But there are no official investment documents, no income reports, nothing. Stone studied the documents carefully, then turned his heavy gaze to Terrence. Is this true? He asked quietly. Terrence looked as if he was about to faint. Brad, I can explain. What exactly? Stone asked coldly. That you lied to me about the source of the money? Or that you deceived your own father? Or maybe that the company you supposedly invested his money in, and which supposedly went bankrupt, is my company? Which, as you well know, is thriving. A heavy silence hung in the living room. Vanity shifted her shocked gaze from her husband to his boss. Terrence? Fear sounded in her voice. What's going on? You said Hubert's money was lost because the company went bankrupt. He lied, Stone cut in. Not only did my company not go bankrupt, but it also paid investors a 30% return last year. If Hubert really invested $200,000 3 years ago, his investment would now be worth about $350,000. Oda nodded with satisfaction. Exactly, but my grandfather didn't get a cent, because his son, my father, simply embezzled the money. He used it as he saw fit. And now that Grandpa started asking uncomfortable questions, he decided to get rid of him by sending him to a cheap nursing home. Terrence's face turned ashen. Audra, you don't understand. I was going to pay that money back. I just need time. Time? Audra raised her eyebrows skeptically. 3 years isn't enough? Or were you waiting for Grandpa to die, and then the problem would solve itself? Stone shook his head, his face showing disappointment and anger. Terrence, we'll talk about this on Monday. In my office, he turned to the other guests. I think we'd all better leave. This is clearly a family matter. The guests began to say their goodbyes awkwardly, casting sympathetic or judgmental glances at Terence. No one wanted to stay in a house where such an unsightly family drama was unfolding. When the last guest left, only we remained in the living room. Me, Audra, Willis, Terence, and Vanity. Vanity looked as if her world had collapsed. She sank helplessly into an armchair, her eyes fixed on her husband. "You lied to me," her voice trembled. "All these years you lied. About our daughter. About money, about work." "Vanity, baby." Terence tried to take her hand, but she pulled away sharply. "I can explain everything." "Really?" Audra interrupted. "Then start by explaining why you abandoned your 5-year-old daughter and her mother. Why you avoided paying child support for years, changing jobs every time the bailiffs came after you. Why you forbade my grandfather from seeing me, depriving him of his only granddaughter." I noticed tears welling up in Terence's eyes. It was hard to tell if they were real or fake. My son had always been a good actor. "I was young," he began. "I made a lot of mistakes. You have to understand—" "Young," Audra interrupted him. "You were 35 when you left us for a woman 15 years younger than you. That's not youth, Father. That's selfishness and irresponsibility." Vanity looked up at Terence. "35?" Her voice sounded incredulous. "You told me you were 25 when you got divorced, that it was a foolish early marriage." Terence looked cornered. "Vanity, please." "You were 40 when we met," she continued as if she hadn't heard him. "Not 30, like you said. And you have a daughter who is now—" She looked at Audra. "30, Audra confirmed. "I'm 30 years old. And yes, my father lied to you about his age. As he did about many other things, I suppose." I watched as Vanity mentally recalculated dates, facts, years, and as reality gradually revealed itself to her in all its ugliness. "You're not 50, she said, looking at her husband. "You're 55, and you lied to me about your daughter, about your previous marriage, about your age, about your father's money," she turned to me. "Hubert, I'm sorry, but I didn't know anything." "I believe you," I said softly. Terence always knew how to hide unpleasant truths. Willis cleared his throat. "I think we need to discuss what to do next." He looked at Terence. "Hubert has every reason to sue you, Mr. Daly. Fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, the list goes on. At the very least, you owe him $200,000 with interest." Terence spread his arms helplessly. "I don't have that kind of money. I spent it." "On what?" asked Audra. "On a house," Terence replied quietly. "Or rather, on the down payment for this house, and on repairs, and on a car, and on—" "Our wedding?" Vanity's voice trembled. "Our honeymoon in the Maldives? My boutique?" Terence nodded silently, not looking her in the eye. "My God," Vanity whispered, covering her face with her hands. "All these years we've been living on money stolen from your father." Willis tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the armrest of his chair. "There are 2 options," he finally said. "First, we file a formal lawsuit. The case goes to court, and if Terence loses, he faces not only damages, but also possible imprisonment." "No," I shook my head. "I don't want to see my son in prison, despite everything he's done." "Then there's the second option," Willis continued. "Voluntary compensation. Terence sells the house, the car, all the assets that were purchased with Hubert's money, and returns the amount with reasonable interest. Let's say $250,000. "I don't have that kind of money," Terence repeated. "I can't just sell the house. We have a mortgage, and the car is on credit." "Then start small," Audra suggested. "Sell your watch. It looks expensive enough. And your share in your wife's business. And your membership in that country club you mentioned on your social media page. And maybe look for a better job, because it looks like your career at Stone Investments is over." Terence turned even paler. "You don't understand. If Brad fires me, I won't be able to find a job in finance anywhere. Not with this scandal." "You should have thought about that earlier," Audra remarked coldly. "When you cheated on Grandpa, when you lied to your wife, when you abandoned me and Mom. I watched my son closely, the man I once loved more than anything in the world, whom I taught honesty, fairness, responsibility. Where did I go wrong? At what point did he stray from the right path? And could it have been prevented? I can't stay in this house, I finally said, getting up from my seat. Not after everything that's happened. Where will you go? Terrence looked up. You have no money, no home. He has me, Willis said firmly. Hubie can live with me for as long as it takes, until we resolve this issue legally. And he has me, Audra added, taking my hand. I won't let my grandfather live in poverty or depend on the man who deceived him. Vanity stood up too. Hubert, she began uncertainly, I swear I didn't know where that money came from. If I had known, I believe you, I repeated. You're also a victim of Terrence's lies. Terrence looked at us with the confusion of a man who suddenly found himself alone, surrounded by accusers. You can't just walk away, he said, panic in his voice. We're family. We have to solve problems together. Family? I smiled bitterly. You only remembered your family now, when your lies have been exposed, when your career is in jeopardy, when your wife has learned the truth about your past? I shook my head. No, Terrence, you destroyed our family yourself, with your actions, your lies, your betrayal. Audra helped me put on my jacket. Willis took my small bag with the essentials, which I had packed in advance and hidden under the bed. We'll be in touch through my lawyer, Willis said to Terrence. Prepare an inventory of all the property purchased with Hubert's money, and start thinking about ways to compensate for the damage. We headed for the exit, leaving Terrence and Vanity in the ruined living room, among half-empty glasses and the remains of a failed party. When we were already at the door, I turned around one last time. You know, Terrence, I said quietly, the saddest thing about this story isn't the money. Money comes and goes. The saddest thing is the time. The years you could have spent with your daughter, the years I could have spent with my granddaughter. No amount of money can bring that back. We stepped out into the cool evening air. The stars were shining brightly in the Gainesville sky. Oda held my hand tightly, as if she were afraid I would disappear if she let go. Willis walked slightly ahead, pointing the way to his car. At that moment, despite the pain and bitterness of betrayal, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if a heavy burden that I had been carrying for years had finally fallen from my shoulders. I was no longer a prisoner in my own son's house. I no longer had to endure humiliation, lies, and neglect. I was free again, and next to me was my granddaughter, a part of my family that I thought I had lost forever. When we got into Willis's car, Audra hugged me tightly. I'm sorry, Grandpa, she whispered. I'm sorry we weren't there for you all these years. You're here now, I replied, feeling tears welling up in my throat, and that's all that matters. Willis started the engine, and we drove away from the house that had never been and could never be my home. Ahead lay an unknown future, court proceedings, and a fight to restore justice. But at that moment, I felt only gratitude for a friend who had not abandoned me in my time of need, and for a granddaughter who had returned to my life to protect her grandfather. Willis's house was exactly as I had imagined it, spacious, practical, without unnecessary frills, but with character, just like its owner. While Audra was preparing a guest room for me on the first floor, I sat in an armchair by the window, looking out at Gainesville at night. My thoughts were confused. My emotions were turbulent. The joy of being reunited with his granddaughter was mixed with the bitterness of his son's betrayal. You'll be comfortable here, Willis said, entering the room with a cup of hot tea. The room is on the first floor, so you don't have to climb the stairs, and the bathroom is nearby. Thank you, I said gratefully, taking the cup, for everything, for helping me, for not abandoning me. Willis waved his hand dismissively. Come on, Hubie. We've been through so much shit together, he said, sitting down in the chair opposite me. Remember that arrest in '93, when the guy with the shotgun came at us? I smiled at the memory. How could I forget? You covered me back then, and you pulled me out from under the rubble in 2001 when the roof of an abandoned warehouse collapsed. Willis chuckled. So don't thank me. We've always had each other's backs. Audra entered the room with an extra blanket and my medication, which we had managed to grab from Terrence's house. Everything's ready, Grandpa, she smiled, but I could see the fatigue in her eyes. You need to rest. Today was a tough day. For all of us, I nodded. You should go to bed too, kid. Long flight, nerves. We'll talk tomorrow. Audra kissed me on the cheek and went to her room upstairs. Willis and I were left alone. Do you think Terrence will try to do something? I asked after a pause. Willis rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I doubt it today. He's got other things to worry about right now, dealing with the aftermath of the failed party, with his wife, with his colleagues, but tomorrow, he shrugged. He's backed into a corner, and a cornered animal can be dangerous. I nodded in agreement. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. Too much had happened. Too many emotions needed processing. I lay awake for a long time, listening to the rain drumming on the roof of Willis's house, thinking about Terrence, about the boy I once taught to ride a bike. The young man Paige had first introduced to me, beaming with happiness, the person he had become. Somewhere I had made a mistake. Somewhere we had all made a mistake. The morning began with a phone call. Willis, already dressed and shaved, handed me the phone. "It's Vanity," he said quietly. "She wants to talk to you." I took the phone, preparing myself for accusations, shouting, threats. But Vanity's voice sounded unusually quiet and uncertain. "Hubert?" She cleared her throat. I I wanted to say again that I didn't know anything about the money, about what Terrence did. "I believe you," I repeated yesterday's words. "I didn't know about his daughter either," she continued, "that he abandoned her, that he didn't pay child support, that he lied about his age." Her voice was thick with tears. "I thought I knew my husband." I sighed heavily. We both thought we knew him. There was a pause, then Vanity spoke again, in a more businesslike tone. "After you left, we had a serious conversation. At night. Terrence denied everything at first, saying that you, Audra, and your friend had all misunderstood. Then he started to make excuses. He said he planned to return the money, but unforeseen circumstances arose. That he loved me and didn't want to upset me with the truth about his past." "And you believed him?" I couldn't hide the skepticism in my voice. "No," Vanity replied firmly. "I didn't believe a single word. Because you see, when you start to doubt someone, you check everything. I found the documents for our house. The first payment was made exactly 1 week after your money was transferred to Terrence's account. $200,000. Terrence always said it was his savings from years of work. I felt a lump of bitterness rise in my throat. My house which Ethel and I had bought, where we had raised our son, where we had spent the best years of our lives, it had been sold so that Terrence could buy a house for his new family. "I'm filing for divorce," Vanity continued after a pause, "and I've already contacted a lawyer. Terrence doesn't know. He's trying to call his boss, his colleagues, trying to save his career, his reputation. But I know Bradford Stone. He doesn't forgive lies and manipulation." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this." "Don't be," she said, her voice hardening. "I chose Terrence myself. I trusted him." I turned a blind eye to the oddities, the inconsistencies, his unwillingness to talk about his past. Now I'm paying for my naivety. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "First, I'm going to secure my rights to the house and the business," Vanity replied. "Formally, the house belongs to both of us. But since the down payment was made with money stolen from you, it complicates the situation. My lawyer believes you are entitled to compensation from the value of the house." "I don't want your house," I said wearily. "I want my money back. With interest, as Willis said. $250,000. "And you'll get it," Vanity said confidently. "The house will have to be sold anyway. After the mortgage is paid off, there will be enough left to give you your money back. I'll personally see to it." I was surprised by her determination. Maybe I'd been wrong about Vanity all these years. Maybe she wasn't as petty and cold-hearted as she seemed. Or maybe Terrence's betrayal had brought out something new and better in her. After talking to Vanity, the day went on as usual. Audra worked remotely, periodically calling her colleagues in Boston. Willis contacted his former colleague, a lawyer specializing in family law and financial disputes. I just relaxed, enjoying the peace and quiet in the absence of the tension I always felt at Terrence's house. Towards evening, the doorbell rang. Willis opened it, and I heard a voice that made my heart sink. "Terrence." "I need to talk to my father." His voice sounded tense. "I know he's here." "Hubert doesn't have to talk to you," Willis replied coldly. "I'm his son, damn it." Terrence's voice was tinged with hysteria. "I have a right to talk to my own father." I got up from my chair and, leaning on my cane, went out into the hallway. "It's okay, Willis," I said. "I'll talk to him." Willis reluctantly stepped aside, letting Terrence into the house, but remained standing nearby, ready to intervene at any moment. Terrence looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his tie was crooked, his eyes were red, and he had stubble on his cheeks. He clearly hadn't slept all night. "Dad," he began, taking a step toward me. "We need to talk, alone." I shook my head. "Whatever you want to say, you can say in front of Willis. I have no secrets from my friends." Terrence shot Willis an annoyed look, but continued. "I came to apologize for yesterday, for, for the storage room. It was stupid and impulsive. I shouldn't have." "You didn't come to apologize for locking me up," I interrupted him. "For getting caught. For letting your guests see who you really are." Terrence's face contorted into a grimace. "Fine," he raised his voice. "You want the truth? I'm here because you ruined my life, my career, my marriage, everything I've built over the years. You ruined your own life," I replied calmly, "with your lies, with your betrayal, with your greed." "Greed?" Terrence was almost shouting. "I've been taking care of you for 3 years. I give you a roof over your head, food, medicine. With my own money," I reminded him. "With the money you stole from me under the guise of investments." Terrence clenched his fists. "I was going to pay it back, I swear. But there were unexpected expenses, problems at work." "Enough," I raised my hand, stopping the stream of excuses. "I heard it yesterday, and Vanity heard it, and your guests. No one believed you." Terrence moved closer, his eyes shining feverishly. "Listen, Dad, Brad called me this morning. I'm fired. 15 years in finance, and now no company will hire me. Vanity isn't answering my calls. Her things are gone from the house. She even took her toothbrush." He ran a hand through his tousled hair. "I'm broke. Do you understand? BROKE. What do you want from me?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Help me." His voice was desperate. "Drop the charges. Say it was a misunderstanding, that you offered me the money yourself, that it was a gift, not an investment. Talk to Brad, to Vanity." I looked at my son, this broken, desperate man, and felt nothing but fatigue and disappointment. "No," I said firmly. "I won't lie to cover up your lies. I won't help you avoid the consequences of your own actions. You stole $200,000 from me, everything I had. You were going to put me in a cheap nursing home so I wouldn't interfere with your perfect life. You locked me in a storage room like I was a piece of junk. And now you want me to save you?" Terrence fell to his knees and grabbed my arm. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "Please, Dad, I beg you. You're all I have left. Families should stick together in tough times." I remembered all the times Terrence had manipulated me. When he made me feel guilty for being a burden, when he hinted that I should be grateful he was putting up with me in his house, when he humiliated me in front of Vanity and guests, and something inside me finally hardened. "Stand up," I said coldly. "Don't humiliate yourself. It won't help." Terrence stood up, his face contorted with anger. "You heartless old man," he spat. "After everything I've done for you." "And what exactly have you done for me, Terrence?" I asked calmly. "Stole my money? Took my house? Forbid me to see my only granddaughter? Locked me in the storage room?" "I gave you a roof over your head when you couldn't live on your own," Terrence growled. "You convinced me that I couldn't live on my own," I corrected him. "After my mini-stroke, I made a full recovery. The doctor said I could continue to live independently. But you convinced me that I needed constant care, that I could fall, lose consciousness, die alone. You scared me, Terrence, and you used my fear to get my house and my money." Terrence turned pale. He didn't expect me to understand all this, to realize the extent of his manipulation. "That's not true," he muttered uncertainly. "I was worried about you. Like a son." "Like a son," I repeated bitterly. "A son who didn't come to his mother's funeral because he was on vacation with his new wife? A son who didn't visit me for years until he found out about my mini-stroke and the insurance money I received? A son who abandoned his own 5-year-old daughter and didn't pay child support?" Terrence's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You think you've won? That your precious granddaughter and that former prosecutor will save you? They'll leave. Willis is old, just like you. And Audra lives in Boston. She has her own life. They'll leave you, and I'll be here. And I'll remember this betrayal." Willis took a step forward, his face darkening with anger. "Is that a threat?" he asked quietly. Terrence recoiled. No, just facts. Then here's another fact. I straightened up, looking my son straight in the eye. I'm taking you to court for fraud, for embezzlement, for elder abuse. I have proof of the money transfers. I have witnesses to your treatment of me. And I have Odra, a prosecutor who knows how the justice system works. You're going to give me my money back, Terrence, with interest. $250,000, or you'll go to jail. Terrence looked at me with hatred and fear. You wouldn't dare, not your own son. I would, I said firmly, because you stopped being the son I knew and loved a long time ago. Terrence took a step back, then another, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and despair. You'll regret this, he repeated. I swear you will. Is that another threat? Willis asked, reaching for his phone. Maybe I should call the police? Add threats to the list of charges? Terrence froze, then shook his head. No need for the police, he said, giving me one last look full of hatred. You'll remember this conversation, Father, when you're alone, when your precious granddaughter goes back to her life and this old man dies like my mother did. You'll remember that I was the only one who could take care of you until the end. With that, he left, slamming the door so hard that the windows rattled. Willis and I stared silently at the closed door. Are you okay? Willis finally asked. I nodded slowly, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. You know, all my life I believed that a parent's love for their child was unconditional. No matter what happened, no matter how the child behaved, the parent would still love them. I sighed heavily. But today I realize that's not entirely true. Love remains, but respect, trust, the desire to be close. All of that can be lost. And Terrence lost it. Willis put his hand on my shoulder. It's not your fault, Hubie. You were a good father. Terrence made his choice. I nodded, but inside I still felt a dull ache. It wasn't because of Terrence's threats. They didn't scare me. It was the realization that my only son, the boy Ethel and I loved so much, had turned into a person capable of betrayal, lies, and manipulation. A person I no longer recognized. Odra came out of her room, drawn by the noise. What's going on? She asked, looking from me to Willis. I heard shouting. Your father came, Willis replied. He tried to convince Hubert to drop the lawsuit. Audra came over to me and took my hand. So what did you decide, Grandpa? I looked into my granddaughter's eyes so similar to those of her grandmother, my Ethel, honest, direct, full of warmth and understanding. And I knew I had made the right decision. I'm going to court, I said firmly. Terrence must answer for his actions. He must return my money, and he must understand that you can't betray the people closest to you with impunity. Odra hugged me tightly, and in that embrace I felt more support and love than I had in the 3 years I had spent at my son's house. I'm proud of you, Grandpa, she whispered, and Grandma would be proud too. There was a sincerity in her words that was so lacking in Terrence's, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that I was doing the right thing, that I was defending not only my money, but also my dignity, my right to respect, care, and honest relationships. Let Terrence think I'm a heartless old man. Let him threaten and try to manipulate me. I won't give in anymore. I won't let myself be used. I won't let myself be humiliated and deceived. Because I deserve better. Because even at 74, it's not too late to start respecting yourself and demanding respect from others. Even if that other is your own son. 2 weeks had passed since the dramatic party that turned my life upside down. All this time I had been living with Willis, gradually getting used to my new reality, freedom from humiliation and the presence of Odra in my life. During those days, we made up for a quarter of a century of separation, talking for hours about the past and the present, but I knew I couldn't stay forever. Audra would soon have to return to Boston. Her work couldn't wait forever. I found a few apartments, I said at breakfast, laying out the printouts of the ads. Not far from here. They're small, but I don't need much. Don't rush, Hubie, Willis grunted, spreading jam on his toast. You can live here as long as you need to. I know, but I need my own place. Audra entered the kitchen with her laptop in her hands. I have news. I just spoke with Caleb Morton. He's one of the best family law attorneys in Gainesville. He agreed to take our case. How much does he charge? I asked, immediately thinking about money. Nothing, Audra smiled. He's an old friend of my law school professor, and he has a personal score to settle with Terrence's company. He's taking the case for free, and if we win, he'll get a percentage. And there's something else, she showed me an apartment listing. It's perfect for you. First floor near a park, the owner is willing to rent it with minimal security deposit, considering your status as a former bailiff. Sounds great, but until we win the case, I don't even have the money for a security deposit. Willis and Audra exchanged glances. We've taken care of that. Willis waved his hand. I'll lend you the money for now. You can pay me back when we win the case. What if we don't win? Audra snorted. Grandpa, we have ironclad evidence. The bank transfer, Terrence's letter with his promises, the lack of investment documents, Stone's testimony. We'll win. 3 days later, I moved into a new apartment. Willis helped me move my things, and Audra took care of the decorating. The landlady, an elderly widow named Eleanor Price, heard my story and reduced the rent by 30% for a good man in trouble. That's it, Audra said, putting away the last of the books. Now it really feels like home. I looked around the sun-filled room and felt a lump in my throat. My own apartment, my own space, my own life. The court hearing was scheduled for the first of the following month. Audra had to fly to Boston 3 days before the hearing, but she promised to return the day before to support me. When she left, the days dragged on more slowly. I furnished the apartment, walked in the park, and met with Willis. Gradually, I was getting used to life without constant tension and fear. 2 days before the trial, Vanity called. Terrence got the summons, she said without preamble. He's furious. He says he won't show up in court. And you? I asked. What do you think? I think he ruined his own life, and I'm going to the hearing. I'll give truthful testimony about how he used your money. On the day of the trial, Audra returned as promised. Willis and I met her, and together we went to the courthouse, an old brick building where I once worked. Terrence showed up at the last minute, looking exhausted and aged. He didn't look in our direction, sitting with his nose buried in his documents. The hearing lasted only 3 hours. Caleb Morton presented irrefutable evidence. The bank transfer, the letter with promises, Vanity's testimony, Stone's testimony. Terrence's lawyer tried to build a defense around the idea that it was a family loan, but his arguments were shattered by the clear wording in Terrence's letter, which referred to investments and returns with interest. When Terrence himself testified, he looked as if he was about to collapse. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and his voice was breaking. He repeated the same excuses. He planned to return the money. He cared about me. I myself suggested that he invest. Mr. Daly, the judge addressed him, you claim that you cared for your father, but witness testimony suggests that you planned to send him to a state nursing home in Oklahoma, even though his condition allowed him to pay for better care. Can you explain that? Terrence hesitated, then mumbled something about medical supervision. What about the incident with the storage room? The judge continued. Why did you lock up your 74-year-old father? It was a moment of weakness, Terrence admitted. He deliberately went out to the guest to embarrass me. The court found Terrence guilty of fraud and ordered him to pay $250,000, $200,000 in principal, and $50,000 in interest. Given his situation, the court gave him 6 months to pay, with the option of selling his property. 3 months later, Terrence and Vanity's house was put up for sale. Willis showed me an ad in the newspaper. Spacious family home, urgent sale due to divorce. Do you want to go see it? He asked, and I realized that he meant not the house, but the process of Terrence's move. Yes, I decided. I want to see justice prevail. On moving day, we parked in front of the house. We watched as the movers carried out furniture in boxes, as Vanity directed the process, as Terrence wandered around looking lost. Vanity noticed us and came over to our car. The house sold for $300,000, she said without preamble. After the mortgage is paid, $260,000 remains. $250,000 will go to you, as the court ruled. And you, I asked, what will happen to you? I'm moving to my sister's in Atlanta. I'm starting a new business there. What about Terrence? He rented an apartment on the other side of town. He found a job at an insurance company, with difficulty considering the scandal. He's starting from scratch, she paused, but he hasn't learned his lesson. He still considers himself a victim. He still blames everyone but himself. I nodded. I didn't expect anything else. Terrence had always been incapable of admitting his mistakes and taking responsibility. Soon we saw him come out with the last bag and stop at the door. His shoulders were slumped, his face gaunt. For a moment he turned his head in our direction, and our eyes met. There was no remorse or reconciliation in his eyes, only a dull, hidden resentment. He got into his old car and drove away without looking back. I watched him go, feeling something inside me finally let go. That last thread of hope for reconciliation that I, without realizing it, had still held on to. "Well, that's it," Willis said, starting the engine. "Justice has prevailed. Shall we go home?" I nodded, turning away from the empty house, from the past that no longer had power over me. "Yes, home," I agreed, "to my apartment, where Audra is waiting for us with dinner." We drove through the quiet streets of Gainesville, and I thought about the strange twists and turns of fate. I lost my son, but I gained a granddaughter. I lost my home, but I gained my freedom. I lost money, but in the end I got it back, with interest and a sense of justice. And although the bitterness of my son's betrayal would never completely disappear, I knew I could move on. Because at 74, I finally understood. Sometimes you have to let go of those who hurt you, even if they are your closest loved ones. Sometimes you have to choose yourself, your dignity, your right to respect. Even if it's the hardest choice you'll ever make.